Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah,
We're the place you come to when you want to cut through the chatter, get right to the core insights, and really understand what matters.
that's right. And today we are definitely plunging into something that sparks a lot of chatter.
We are. We're tackling a book that's, well, let's just say it's as controversial as it is well-known. Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction.
Just the title, right? It gets people talking immediately. It promises these secrets to attraction. But it also, it definitely challenges how we usually think about love and influence.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've got some really interesting sources lined up that kind of capture that whole debate perfectly.
We do. We've been digging into a pretty critical book review from a personal blog, Danny Boo Boo, which offers one perspective.
And then on the other side,
We've got this super lively, really charged discussion thread from Reddit, where real readers are just fiercely arguing about whether the book actually works, its historical accuracy, and importantly, the ethics of it all.
okay, so our mission today isn't just a book report. We want to go deeper.
Much deeper.
We're going to really unpack Greene's main ideas. Take a hard look at those historical examples he uses, some of which are, let's say, questionable.
Definitely questionable.
And crucially, dissect the really strong reactions people have, often completely opposite reactions. The goal is to pull out the key takeaways for you.
Right. Whether you're just fascinated by human psychology or maybe you're looking for ways to navigate tricky social situations a bit better.
So get ready. It's going to be a nuanced look, sometimes maybe a bit uncomfortable, at a book that really pushes back against conventional ideas of romance and power.
We're asking, is seduction really just a game of psychology? And if so, what does that actually mean for how you understand human connection?
Okay, let's dive in. Greene really kicks things off with a fundamental premise, doesn't he?
He does, right at the start.
He says flat out, seduction is a game of psychology, not beauty. That's a pretty bold statement to open with.
It really is. It immediately strips away all that, romantic fog we usually associate with attraction. And what's really fascinating, I think, is Greene's insistence here. He's basically saying that understanding and, crucially, applying psychological principles matters way more than just, natural charm or being good-looking.
So forget destiny and soulmates.
Pretty much, according to Greene. He sees our typical view of love, this sort of sacred, magical realm. He calls that a foolish prejudice.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah. He even says it's often just a cloak for our laziness. His point is that leaving things to chance is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so it's all about strategy.
Exactly. The key insight is he's reframing attraction entirely. Not as some mysterious magic, but as a skill, something you can learn, something systematic, all rooted in, psychological maneuvering. It really dares you to look at romance strategically.
And to make it systematic, he lays out this whole framework. It's quite detailed.
Very detailed.
He identifies 9 types of seductionists and, get this, 18 seducer victims.
Right. You've got types like the siren, using pure allure, or the rake, that charming but kind of dangerous type.
And on the other side, the victims, like the disappointed dreamer, someone who's always looking for that perfect love story.
And that reviewer we mentioned, Danny Boo Boo, they found these categories, a bit much. Abstract, maybe overly complicated.
Yeah, I can see that.
But if you step back and look at the bigger picture, you could argue Greene is trying to build, a whole taxonomy. A classification system for human emotional weak spots and desires.
So he's not just observing, he's dissecting, trying to map it all out.
Exactly, like creating a blueprint for human interaction. It's ambitious, even if it feels a bit abstract when you try to, apply it directly.
Okay, but mapping desire is one thing. His use of history, though, that seems to be where things get really heated.
Oh, absolutely. This is a major point of contention.
Our sources point out that a lot of his examples are, dated, or maybe even just straight up fictional.
Like Odysseus from the Odyssey. I mean, great story, but...
Right. Clearly a literary figure, not exactly historical evidence for seduction techniques.
And that really begs the question, doesn't it? When you see these historical stories in the book, how seriously should you take them? Are they meant to be literal truth or just illustrations?
Good question.
The reviewer was definitely skeptical. They pointed to some really wild stories like a woman apparently wrapped in a carpet to sneak into a city, or someone digging a tunnel into a castle.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
Exactly. The reviewer called them likely fiction and definitely unrealistic. So you have to wonder, is Greene maybe blurring the lines on purpose? between history and myth to make his point seem more timeless or powerful.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe the stories are more like parables. Their purpose isn't strict accuracy.
Perhaps. But then you have examples like Charlie Chaplin. Greene uses him as a seducer type.
Right, but the critique we saw pointed out something pretty uncomfortable about that.
Yeah, the age gaps. 3 of Chaplin's 4 wives were teenagers when they married him. 2 were just 16, and his last wife was 18 when he was 54.
So was that really seduction in the way Greene means it? Or was it more about his immense fame and power dynamics?
That's a really valid criticism, and it comes up a lot with Greene's examples. If you're claiming to teach an art, does relying on these kinds of stories maybe undermine the whole thing as a practical guide?
Fair point.
But even with the dodgy history, his choice of stories is often very deliberate. It's about the lesson he wants to teach about power. Like that story of Emperor Claudius and his wife Messalina.
Oh, right, I remember that one. He uses it to talk about attention, yeah.
Exactly. Greene claims Claudius basically ignored his beautiful wife for too long, prolonged inattention, he calls it. And that's what supposedly drove her to have affairs.
And the takeaway lesson is?
That nothing is more infuriating than being paid no attention. That kind of neglect, Greene says, can create hatred. It's a psychological point he's making, regardless of how accurate the history is.
Okay, I see the distinction. And then there was that surprising detail about Josephine Baker.
Yes. Profiled as a natural seducer. What really jumps out there, and surprised the reviewer too, is seeing a Black entertainer achieve such incredible fame in early 1900s Paris.
It challenges stereotypes, right?
Totally. You had Josephine Baker perfumes, dolls, clothes. Apparently, fashionable French women were even using makeup called Baker Fix to try and darken their skin like hers.
Wow.
It just adds this unexpected layer, doesn't it, about influence, appeal, and how fascination can sometimes cut across really deep social divides of the time.
Okay, so we've looked at the theory, the history. Now let's get into the really controversial stuff. The actual how-to, the tactics.
Right, the step-by-step process he lays out.
He breaks it down into 4 phases. Let me see. Separation, then creating pleasure and confusion, deepening the effect, and the last one is ominously called moving in for the kill.
Yeah, the language itself is pretty intense.
And within those phases, he gets really specific about tactics. Things like approach indirectly. Why? To create a false sense of security.
Makes sense, strategically.
Then send mixed signals to confuse people. Stir anxiety and discontent in them about their own lives. Even isolate your victim.
Isolate them.
Wow. Mix pleasure and pain. He says mystery is the lifeblood of seduction. I mean, reading this list, it sounds less like romance and more like psychological warfare.
It really does. And that raises a huge ethical question, doesn't it? When does seduction just become straight up manipulation? Especially when you're talking about intentionally making someone feel bad or insecure.
Yeah, where is that line?
Well, one tactic that really stood out in the sources, especially on Reddit, was this idea to create a need. Basically, criticize someone to make them feel lacking so that you can then step in and supposedly fill that void.
Oof. That sounds unpleasant.
To put it mildly, the question becomes, can you even interpret something like create a need or mix pleasure and pain in a way that isn't psychologically damaging? Or is that just baked into Greene's method? This one tactic got incredibly strong reactions online.
I bet. The Reddit comments you mentioned were pretty damning, weren't they?
Oh yeah. People used words like appalling, trash, unhealthy, toxic, emotionally abusive. Some even called it sexual coercion.
So, strong feelings.
Very. And many users specifically said these tactics only really work on people who are already vulnerable, those with trauma, low self-esteem, or people who maybe lack self-respect.
That's worrying.
There was one really powerful story on Reddit. A user talked about being with a partner who fit Greene's coquette type.
What was that like?
They said the partner was always in a mood, most of the time critical and ignoring them, but then just occasionally they'd be showered with affection. This hot and cold created this really intense bond.
Sounds exhausting.
Exactly. And other commenters immediately jumped in, identifying it as classic narcissistic behavior, or what's sometimes called a trauma bond.
Trauma bond.
Yeah, it's this intense, often unhealthy connection that forms from those cycles of abuse or neglect, mixed with intermittent kindness or validation. It really shows how these abstract techniques can play out in damaging ways in real relationships.
That's pretty striking. And it ties into other bits of advice from Greene, right? Like for the rake type.
Yes, exactly. His advice for the rake, if they get caught being, well, a rake, is basically play the victim.
How so?
He literally advises saying something like, fall back on your weakness, your desire to change, and your inability to do so. With so many women at your feet, what can you do? You are the one who is the victim. You need help.
Wow. Turning bad behavior into an appeal for sympathy. That's quite the strategy.
It's very calculated. And this feeling that the book contains powerful, potentially dangerous tools isn't just about romance.
What do you mean?
Some Redditors brought up the claim, and who knows if it's true, but it's out there that Greene's books are sometimes banned in prison.
Really? Why?
Supposedly because inmates were using the strategies to manipulate guards or other inmates, and advance your career or mess with people's minds. It just underlines how potent and potentially harmful these tactics are seen to be, way beyond just dating.
Okay, so the ethical red flags are huge. The potential for harm seems really clear, but the big question remains, doesn't it? Does any of this stuff actually work?
That is the million-dollar question, and our sources, they are completely split on this. It's fascinating.
So on one side, we have that critical review from Danny Boo Boo.
Yeah.
They gave the book just 2 stars out of 5.
Yeah, pretty low.
They basically said it did not connect with them at all, found it too abstract, and ultimately felt it offered no real actionable advice they could actually use.
Okay, so that's one perspective. Not useful, too theoretical.
But then you look at the Reddit threads.
And it's a completely different story for many people there.
Yeah.
We saw numerous users saying emphatically, yes, this stuff works.
Like giving examples.
Oh, yeah. People claiming personal successes, things like bagging 5 hotties in 3 months using the techniques, or closing a crush within a month. Real specific claims. And interestingly, some suggested it's especially helpful for people who feel they have maybe low social intelligence. There was one user who identified as autistic who said the book was incredibly helpful for just understanding how people work and psychology in general.
That's a really different take.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's insightful here is that huge gap, right, between the critical review saying it's useless and these users saying it changed my life. It highlights how subjective this all is.
Human interaction isn't exactly science.
Not at all. And it reveals this paradox. The exact same strategies that some people label toxic manipulation, others see as vital tools for understanding the world. Not necessarily to do it themselves, but maybe to protect themselves from it.
Ah, so using it defensively. That's interesting.
Exactly.
So what does that mean for you, listening to this?
Okay.
Even if the idea of seducing someone using these tactics feels, icky,
Which it might.
many readers seem to find real value in understanding these dynamics, just to be aware of them, like a defense mechanism.
Precisely. People talked about using the book to recognize manipulation elsewhere, like spotting the create a need tactic in advertising, for example.
Oh, that's clever.
Or using it to be on the lookout for common weaknesses that manipulative people might exploit. Basically, understanding how manipulative people behave so that you protect yourself.
So it becomes a tool for psychological literacy almost.
You could see it that way, understanding human psychology in a broader sense, maybe even for navigating office politics or career stuff. Which then raises another big question.
Which is?
If you reframe these tactics not as weapons for manipulation, but as tools for understanding, does that change the ethics of learning about them? Is it less about using them and more about recognizing them? A shield, not a sword.
That really does make you think about knowledge differently. It's not inherently good or bad, it's how it's used.
And some readers push back even further. They argue Greene's definition of seduction isn't just about sex, it's about attracting powerfully in a broader sense. And some even claim the book helped them become less self-absorbed and more in tune with the other person's feelings, which is kind of the opposite of what you might expect.
Wait, really? How?
The argument is that to truly seduce effectively, even by Greene's rules, you have to pay incredibly close attention to the other person, understand their desires, their insecurities, and that focus, ironically, could make you seem more attentive. One person even said it could make a stale marriage spicy again.
Huh. That's a surprising twist.
Yeah.
Using manipulative tactics to become more attentive.
It's definitely a counterintuitive take, but it was out there in the discussions.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground here with Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction. We've looked at his core psychological framework, those debatable historical stories.
They're really intense ethical arguments it stirs up.
And these surprising claims about whether it works and even how it can be used defensively. It's clear this book isn't simple. It acts almost like a litmus test for how we view human relationships.
Absolutely. It's definitely not a book everyone embraces, far from it. But it keeps provoking discussion, doesn't it? It forces us to look at some uncomfortable things about human nature, about power dynamics, and all sorts of relationships.
Personal, professional.
Yeah. It's this weird text that somehow manages to teach about potential exploitation while also, for some people, offering tools they feel they need to navigate a pretty complex social world.
So, for you, the learner, tuning in to understand things better, this deep dive shows the art of seduction is way more than just some pickup artist guide. It's like holding up a mirror to parts of our psychology that are, yeah, intriguing, but also, frankly, sometimes pretty unsettling.
It makes you question how much of our emotional lives is, authentic magic and how much might just be well-played strategy.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to maybe chew on.
Knowing Greene's premise that seduction is primarily psychology, and also his point that you can't really seduce someone who fundamentally doesn't want to be seduced on some level, how does understanding these games, these psychological tactics, change how you think about your own relationships or how you approach influence, both in your personal life and maybe even at work?